This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Rabbi Glatstein. I'm sure you all know Torah Anytime, right? Again, not a fundraiser for Torah Anytime, but when you do donate to Torah Anytime, sometimes they call you and they ask you who are your favorite speakers. So I remember they called me last year, the year before. I said, well, there's Rabbi Glatstein. He goes, oh, that's one of our most popular speakers. I don't call him a speaker. He's Talmid Chacham, that's for sure. By the way, he speaks very good. But he's Talmid Chacham, and he's if you just listen to him once, you have to be careful, because if you follow him, if you listen to one class and you go, oh, it was a nice class, you're going to see 5 more right behind it. I don't know. It's like 1,000 classes a day. It's unbelievable. It's any topic you want. I'm following Rabbi Berkowitz because I started with Rabbi Berkowitz a long time ago. You know, Rabbi Berkowitz, because it was just too much for me. I couldn't do it. Going to the train station, finish the whole thing. It was unbelievable. And Musad, Parasha. You want something, go to RabbiDG.com. You want something for Shabbat, English, Hebrew, whatever you want. Doesn't matter. You want. It's amazing. The Chidushim, as you think you have a Peshat on a pasuk in the Torah, you wouldn't believe, right? Right? You won't believe it. That's what happened in that pasuk. What are you talking about? If I just recommend you, if you go on Torah in time, to follow the rabbi. Right? You follow him? Yeah? Amazing, right? Okay, amazing. So, and you're sitting down at dinner. Okay, you're sitting down at dinner and you have a few minutes. Just put on the rabbi. Anyway, Rabbi Glatstein, my wife's giving me she says the boys have to go.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. I really had no idea what I was getting into. A few gentlemen asked me, do I know Ezra? I don't know Ezra from a hole in the wall. I got a call to come, Rabbi, do you do birthday parties? I'm not a clown. I don't juggle. I don't pull a rabbit out of I don't do birthday parties. They said this is for Sephardim birthday parties I do. I knew there would be speakers, but 20 speakers before me I didn't realize. But Baruch Hashem, to hear about Harav Avigdor Miller, when I was a bacher in yeshiva, I had a chavrusa who used to call Rav Miller on the phone. I used to sometimes eavesdrop on his conversations. And it was my chavrusa's, I had a very chashav chavrusa. My chavrusa, he was the first guy in the Beis HaMedrash. When he would learn, he would say over the Rashba in his sleep. Really, be'emet. He would say over the Rashba in his sleep. And he used to walk to Rav Miller, and he encouraged me to talk to him. So I grew up on Avenue M, and he's 31st. And every Shabbat, I used to walk to Ocean Park, Avenue R, Avenue S. I used to walk every Shabbat to Rav Avigdor Miller Zechatzak Bracha. And it was my chavrusa's birthday, and he asked Rav Miller, what should you do on your birthday? Now, I didn't hear every word that Rav Miller said, and I'm basically reconstructing the response based on what I heard, but I believe Rav Miller said as follows. 2 things. The first thing you have to do on your birthday is you have to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for last year. And the next thing you need to do is you need to pray, you need to be mispala that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you another year. So all of the friends of Rabbi Ezra, Eved Hashem, we all together, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for bestowing upon you a wonderful 60 years, and Be'ezus Hashem, as we say in Yiddish, halavai weiter, many healthy and happy years to come. Now 60 is a very big number. 60 is a very important number. Because the Gemara says in Brachas and Dalet Amud Beis, that Kaloi Martila David Shloisha Pamim B'Choyoy Muftach Loi Sheben Olam Haba. So the Gemara wants to know why. Is it because of the Aleph Beis? So say Kuf Yotes, right? They're Tmanya Alpha Beta. Is it because Poseches Yadecha? So say Kuf Chavav Noisin Lechem L'Chavav. So the Gemara says both. So anyone who says Ashrei, so the Gemara says, in Ashrei, every letter of the Aleph Beis is represented except for the letter Nun, because Nun represents Nefilah, and we don't want to represent Nefilah in Ashrei. But even though there's no letter Nun, still HaKadosh Baruch Hu came and he supported it with the letter Samach, Shenemar, Somech Hashem L'chal HaNoflim, V'zokeh L'chal HaKufim. 60, Samach, is the support of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. 60 is when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and he supports you. Samach, Somech Hashem L'chal HaNoflim. What was the greatest nefilah in the history of the Jewish people? Chet HaMeraglim. That's what caused Churban Beis HaMikdash. What did Kalev do? Vayahas Kalev, Samach Rabati. A big Samach, because we're falling. So Kalev has to come, he has to support the Jewish people. What's an example of nefilah? Davar Asur. You have prohibited matter. It falls. It could ruin, it falls into the chicken soup. The whole chicken soup is done. Nefilah. The chazer treif, it fell, and now the whole soup is ruined. But if you have shishim, if you have 60, says Reb Pinchas Kartzer, so the 60 could come, soymech Hashem l'chol hanoiflim, batel b'shishim. Batel b'shishim. Takes care of all your troubles. They say, in a year like this year, where there are 2 Adars, you have 60 days of Adar, it's mevatel b'shishim, all of the tzarot. So here we have, in year 60, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes, and he says, soymech Hashem l'chol hanoiflim. Hashem comes and he supports us. The letter Nun is Nefilah. Just when there's Nefilah, comes the letter Samach, says Rav Pinchas Karatzer. If you have a Nun, and then it comes the Samach to support it, what do you have? Nes. What's a miracle? A miracle is just when you're about to fall. No! Chovot halvavot. Nothing to fall about. You have Bidachon and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem comes. Soymech Hashem l'chol hanoiflim. The Nes is at hand. That's a miracle. A miracle is just when you're about to fall. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes and he supports. Parshas Chayei Sarah, we read about the Petira of Avraham Avinu. Vayigva, Vayamat Avraham, B'seva, I'll say it in my Havara. How's that? B'seva Toiva Zakein, V'saveya. Avraham was satisfied. Says the Ramban, what is the Torah telling us with this word that Avraham was satisfied? Listen to the Ramban. Shera'a kol mishalois libay v'saveya kol toiva. You know what it means that Avraham died satisfied? That God gave Avraham Avinu everything he could possibly want. He fulfilled every desire of Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was very wealthy. He was kaved ma'od ba'mikneh. Furthermore, Avraham Avinu had a child in his old age. Avraham Avinu had honor. He was Nasi Elokim Ata B'Zechenu. Avraham Avinu had everything a person could have wanted. That's what it means Avraham died Zakein V'Saveya, but the Ramban continues. You know what else Saveya means? Sipur Chaste Hashem B'Tzadikim Umida Toiva Bahem. Hashem is praising the Tzadik Avraham. Shaloi Yisavu B'Moisrois. That Avraham Avinu was happy with what he had. So when Avraham Avinu died, the Torah says one word, Saveya. And what does this one word mean? A, he had everything. B, he was happy. Frekte Kasha. Big spiel. He was happy. Of course he was happy. He had everything. I would also be happy if I had everything. The only thing is, I'm missing A, I'm missing B, I'm missing C. If you give me everything, I'd also be happy. What's the big shevach of Avraham Avinu? Ramban says, Saveya means A, he had everything. B, he was happy. Of course he was happy. He had everything. So what do we see from the Ramban? That typically, normally, if somebody were to have everything, they would be absolutely miserable. They would be depressed. They would be morose. Because having has no connection with a person's happiness. And despite the fact that Avraham had everything, it was a great shevach that Avraham was happy. Because human nature is, even if you have every last thing, you'd be miserable. And Avraham, B'tzid Kosoi, was happy despite the fact that he had everything. Chazal tell us, Paro had a big problem. He had to deal with the Jewish problem. So he called in 3 advisors. Who does he call in? He calls in Bilam, he called in Yisro, and he called Eov. He asked Bilam, what do I do with the Jews? Bilam says, annihilate them. Eov, he kept his mouth closed. Yisro says, Yisro, this is impossible. What am I supposed to say? This is a lose-lose situation. Yisro ran away. So Yisro was rewarded that his children are implanted, the Lishkas Hagozis, the descendants of Yisro are forever Talmidei Chachamim. Bilam was punished. He had his head chopped off. He advised Paro to annihilate the Jewish people. He was murdered. And Eov was silent, and because Eov was silent, so he was punished with Yisurim Noiraim She'en Kamaisai. So let's think for a moment. Whose punishment should be worse? Eov or Bilam? Obviously, Bilam's punishment should be much worse. Bilam advised Paro to annihilate the Jewish people. Eov kept his mouth closed. So Bilam should suffer a much worse punishment than Eov. So why does it seem that in a way Eov got a worse punishment? Eov suffered and suffered more than anybody in the history of the world, and Bilam had a quick fix. He just had his head chopped off. Why did Eov suffer worse than Bilam? And Rav Chaim Shmulevitz famously points out from this Gemara that we have a mistaken understanding of the greatest gift that God gives us. The greatest matana that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives a person is Vilamaves Loinasanani. If you're alive, and you're breathing, and you're kicking, and you could drag yourself out of bed in the morning, that's the greatest matana, and all the Yisurei Eov far surpasses in happiness, in well-being, in good fortune, than the fate of Bilam Harasha. Because Bilam's not here anymore. And Eov got to wake up in the morning. And therefore Eov's punishment was nothing. Because at least Eov could get up in the morning and he could say, Yasor Yisrani Ka Vilamav Esloinasanani. Ma Yisonein Adam Chai. If you're alive, how could you complain? You have no right to complain. If we value the great gift of life, that transcends any difficulty that we have. A great man once said, people have all kinds of questions on God. Why does he do this? Why did God do that? This event, this thing that happened in the 1940s, people have questions on God. Pal, this world is God's question to you. And how you respond is your answer to God. Questions on God. This world is God's question to you. The way you react is your answer. So Avram Avinu, he had everything and he was happy, but there was someone in this world who was happier than Avraham Avinu. You know who was happier than Avram Avinu? Avram was very happy because God promised him, you're going to have the land of Israel and you're going to have children and I'm going to take care of you. But there was a person who was never given any promises, and they were happier than Avram Avinu, because greater than Havtacha is Emunah. Says the Medrash, Sarah Imenu had no promises. She just had Emunah. And it says she lived 100 years, and 20 years, and 7 years. But then it repeats, Shnei Chaye Sarah. What's that doing, Shnei Chaye Sarah? So some Mefarshim say, the main life of Sarah Imenu was Vayihiyu. Vayihiyu is Gematria 37. That from 90 to 127, that was Vayihiyu Chaye Sarah. Because someone who doesn't have children, the life is not the same. So Vayihiyu, only from age 90 to 127, that was the life of Sarah. I have a sefer at home. I should get them into the sefer. The name of the sefer is Ben LaAshri. Yeah, you hear me quote it sometimes? Always. The Ben LaAshri was written by Rabbi Yitzchak HaKohen Huberman. He's a great Mekubal. He's called the Tzaddik V'Ranana. He never was blessed with children. He wrote Sefer Ben LaAshri. He says, anyone who says over the Divrei Torah in a Sefer, he promises he will pray for you and bail you out of any trouble in this world or in the world to come. He was the Chavrusa of my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather was the last Rav of the city of Sachachav. They learned together in the city of Sachachav. I'm working now on selecting the Divrei Torah from the Ben LaAshri that's not Divrei Kabbalah, that you could understand in one sefer that people should be able to say it over. Ben LaAshri says, even though Vayihiyu Chaye Sarah, you would think Sarah's life is only 37 years. No! Shnei Chaye Sarah. Kulan Shavin L'Tova. Whether she had a kid, she didn't have a kid. Whether she's abducted by Paro or she's in Abraham's palace. Doesn't matter. There's no difference. every year in the life of Sarah, kulan shavin l'tova. Happiness is not dependent. Yesh lecha banim, ein lecha banim. Yesh lecha baal, ein lecha baal. Doesn't matter what you have. What you own, what you experience, where you are, how much, how you feel, is not related, connected to happiness in any way at all. Kulan shavin l'tova. They're all equally happy. It says in Netziv, Kulan shavin l'tova, even greater than Avraham Avinu. Because Avraham Avinu was boteach in the Havtacha. Sarah just had emunah. There are two ways to live. It's a birthday. We have to talk about life. Talk about Esav. Esav HaTzadik. You never met someone as big of a tzaddik as Esav. If Esav would walk into the room now, all the Rabbanim would sit down. The Moetzet HaGdolei HaTorah, they would retire. They would hand in the resignation. Esav would be appointed Gadol Hadar. Nobody could hold a candle to Esav. Rav Miller used to talk about this all the time. This is Slabotka. Slabotka. No, we don't understand when we talk about Esav. The Gemara says in Bava Basra that Esav committed 5 sins on that day. By the way, until that day, Avraham Avinu died 5 years early, so he shouldn't see Esav go l'tarbus ra'ah. That means so long as Avraham Avinu was alive, Avraham Avinu would look at a picture of Esav, he would say, Azisa Yiddisha Kind. Esav was a tzaddik yisoid oilam, at least while Avraham was alive, and even afterwards, if we would look at Esav, we wouldn't see anything wrong. And yet the Gemara says in Bava Basra, on that day, Esav committed 5 sins. What are they? He's Ba'al Nara Hamurasa. He killed someone. By the way, he killed someone. Big deal. He killed Nimrod. Nimrod is the biggest rodef in history. What else did he do? He was kafar be'ikr. He was kafar be'tchias hamesim. He vayivez es habechora. Esav committed 5 sins. So we have to ask ourselves one question. What is the shoresh of all of Esav's sins? What's the root of all of his sins? Listen carefully. Vayomer Esav el Yaakov. Haliteni na min ha'adaim hazeh. Why? Ki ayef. He was tired. He was burnt out. You ever hear people say, I'm burnt out. I'm 61 already. I'm burnt out. I'm 200 years old. I'm burnt out. The root of all Aveirah is I'm burnt out. I don't have energy anymore. All the 5 Aveirot of Esav is Ki ayef anoichi. V'haya. V'haniach Hashem Elokecha L'cha mikol oyvech misaviv Ba'aretz Hashem nosen l'cha Timche es zecher Amalek. When does Amalek come? Zachar is asher asa l'cha Amalek b'derech b'tzeischa miMitzrayim Asher karcha b'derech V'yizanev b'cha kol hanachzom archa V'ata ayef. You're burnt out? I go to shul every single day. Today I'm just not feeling it anymore. Enough already. I need a break. I need a vacation. I'm ayef. I'm ayef. The root of all sin is to be ayef. Ki ayef anochi. Oh, he's ayef. He's rotzach. He's ba'al nar murasa. He's kafar be'ikr. He's kafar be'tchias hamisim. When does Amalek come? When you're ayef. But v'koyei Hashem, when you have bitachon, yachalifu koach, you're Energizer Bunny. You're always energized. You're always on the go. You always have vigor. You get up in the morning, there's a bounce in your step. You're never burnt out. I read to you one Ramban. Listen to this Ramban. The Ramban in Parshas Vayetze. Yaakov Avinu, he was learning in Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever 14 years. And he's traveling. You can imagine he was all tired. And he comes to the Be'er, he comes to the well. And he sees on the well, there's, Rock of Gibraltar on the well. And he sees these shepherds at the well. And these shepherds are 6'10", 400 pounds. And they could lift something up with their finger and they're sitting there nebuchos. They can't move anything. Says the pasuk, Vayar v'hinei be'er basada v'hinei sham shloisha edrei tzoin. And what does the pasuk say? Yaakov flicked off the stone off the be'er like you flick off a bottle cap. Says the Ramban, Ya'arich ha'kosov b'sipur hazeh l'hoidiyanu ki koye Hashem yachalifu kayach. Those who hope to God are energized. They're invigorated. V'yirasoi titein ois. Their fear of Hashem endows them with strength. Yaakov Avinu ba min haderech v'hu ayef. Yaakov came from the road. He was also tired. But vayogel levadoi ha'even asher hayu tzrichim alei kol haram. He flicked it off by himself. Why? Because anyone who's connected to God is never burnt out, is never worn out, is never, is always invigorated, is always full of energy, is always hopeful, is always optimistic. That's the difference between, right? If somebody were to ask, what's the difference between Yaakov and Esav? Esav is a murderer, and Yaakov is Talmid Chacham. Yeah, but why? Because Esav is bad, and Yaakov is good. But why? Because Esav is always burnt out, and Yaakov is always full of energy. That's the Nekudas Hachiluk ben Yaakov ve'Esav. So as HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us all many long and happy and healthy years, we have to think, as long as we're alive, and as long as we're kicking, we're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that infuses us with strength, with energy. Baruch Hashem, my grandfather, Zecher Tzak Levracha, who passed away this year, he was in Auschwitz. He was in the crematoria and he was yanked out in the last second. He was on a death march to Dachau. He survived the Holocaust. He passed away this year at 106 years old. If anybody never saw my Zayda get called up to the Torah and jump out of his seat and run to the Torah after 90 years old, with such energy like a young boy, you never saw a Kavod HaTorah in your life. This was a man, he said the hardest part about turning 100 years old is seeing the Rashi Oisi Ois in the Gemara. That's the hardest part about turning 100. V'koye Hashem yachalifu kayach. So we have the great Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva is giving Shiur. And if you're a Magid Shiur, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and he's giving Shiur, and it's late at night. And the people, I don't know, the Talmidim, they had a big birthday party the night before, and they're falling asleep. So Bikesh La'oraran, Rabbi Akiva wanted to wake up his Talmidim. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The Talmidim, they're always falling asleep. So Rabbi Akiva needs to pull out of his sleeve the most interesting story in his repertoire. And Rabbi Akiva says, why did Esther merit to rule over 127 Medinot? In the merit of Sarah Imenu, who lived 127 righteous years. I ask you a question. If you were in a shiur, and you were tired, and the rabbi said that, I don't know about you, I would be out cold. What exactly is so interesting about the 127 righteous years of Sarah Imenu and the 127 Medinot of Esther? So the Chidushei Harim says a beautiful insight. Chidushei Harim says that if for every year of the life of Sarah Imenu, Esther ruled over an entire country, then probably in the merit of every month of Sarah Imenu, Esther ruled over a whole region. And in the merit of every day of Sarah Imenu, Esther ruled over a state. And in the merit of every hour of Sarah Imenu, Esther ruled over a city. And in the merit of every minute of Esther's life, of Sarah's life, Esther ruled over a neighborhood. And in the merit of every second of Sarah's life, Esther ruled over an entire city block. My dear Talmidim, look what you could accomplish in 1 second. If you guys fall asleep now and you miss this svara, you know what you're going to lose out forever and ever? You might lose out an entire block. Wake up! Every minute of life is so valuable. That was the message of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was teaching Chashivut hazman, the importance of every moment of life. So I ask you, why did Rabbi Akiva teach the value of time? Why don't you have Mamar Chazal? Rabbi Gamliel got up and he taught the world every second is valuable. Why not Rabbi Tarfon? Why not Rava? Why Rabbi Akiva? Why is this the message of Rabbi Akiva? Think about the life of Rabbi Akiva for a moment. Rabbi Akiva started at 40 years old. In his 80 years, 60 is not old. 60 is very young. When Moshe Rabbeinu stood in front of Paro, it says, and Moshe was 80 years old when he stood before Paro. So the question is, why do I need to know how old Moshe Rabbeinu was when he stood before Paro? It says Reb Zalman Sorotzkin, because most people think you turn 80, so then you spend a whole year in Deal, and whenever you're not in Deal, you go to Florida, and you relax, and you retire. People think at 80 you kick back and you relax. Moshe Rabbeinu was just getting going at 80 years old. That's when he gave us the Torah. That's when he took us out of Egypt. That's when he gave us the man. The whole career of Moshe Rabbeinu just started when he was turning 80. So the Torah is saying, you think when you turn 80 you retire. When you turn 80, that's when you start working. So 60 is you're not even young yet. Rabbi Akiva started at 40 years old. How was he able to accomplish so much in his life? In only 80 years, it says, Kol yakar ra'ata eno. Rabbi Akiva saw kol, everything. The Medrash says, Afilu mashaloi ra Moshe Rabbeinu ra Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva reached a darga even greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu only reached Mem Tesh Sharei Chachma. Right, the Gemara says, Chamishim Sharei Chachma Nivru Ba'olam, Kulam Nitnu L'Moshe, Chasar Achas, Shenemar, Vatechasareu, Ma'at Me'alokim. So Moshe Rabbeinu had 49 levels of Chachma. Eventually, he got to 50. Vaya'al Moshe me'arvois Moav, says Arizal. Moav is 49. Elhar Nevoi Nunbai. So ultimately, he reached 50. And he gave it over to Yehoshua bin Nun. He was Misponein Bishar Nun, the Chassam Sofer says. But Moshe Rabbeinu only had a little bit of the Shar Nun. But Rabbi Akiva, says Reb Chaim Vital, Kol Ra'asa, Kol Yikar Ra'asa, no, Kol 50. Rabbi Akiva saw all 50. So Rabbi Akiva started at age 40, nothing, 0. And in 80 years, he reached the Madrega higher than Moshe Rabbeinu. How did he do it? The first thing he did is, he didn't waste a second of his life. Rabbi Akiva valued every moment of life. Rabbi Akiva understood the value of a year, the value of a month, the value of an hour, the value of a second, says Ben Yehoyada, says Ramami Pano. Akiva, Rashi Tevois, Yesh, Koneh, Olamo, Bisha, Achat. That's the name, that's the whole name. You could acquire Olam Haba in even 1 second. Now there's a Machlokas HaPoskim. How do you spell any Akivas here? Anybody named Akiva here? How do you spell Akiva? It's Machlokas HaPoskim. Some spell it with an Aleph. There's one of the Rishonim, Rabbi Yitzchak Mivina, was writing a sefer on how to spell names in Gittin. And he wasn't sure how to spell Akiva, and he had a chalom, and in the chalom he saw the pasuk, or Zarua la Tzadik, or the Yishrei Leiv Simcha, and he realized Soifei Tevois, Reish, Ayin, Kuf, Yud, Vez, Hey, Rabbi Akiva. And he spells Akiva with a Hey from the pasuk Or Zarua la Tzadik, or the Yishrei Leiv Simcha. The name of his sefer is Or Zarua. That's for Or Zarua, because we don't paskin that way. We spell Akiva with an Aleph. So Akiva with an Aleph is Rashi Tevot, Yesh, Koneh, Olamo, Bisha, Achat. Ask the Ben Yoyada, and what about according to the poskim that you spell with a Hey? Still he says, Yesh, Koneh, Olamo, Bisha, Ha'achat. It's the same thing. Rabbi Akiva's name personifies, embodies the concept of the value of every single moment of life. Recently, you want to come with me to Turkey? I want to go to the kever.
I'm going to tell you Hawaii. When you find the kever in Hawaii,
We're working on it.
Gotta be something.
Reb Chaim Falaji, one of the great all-time Gedolim, Mechabrei Svarim, he wrote 72 Svarim. He wrote a sefer called Chaim Tchila. Chaim Tchila is 101 ways to connect the end of the Torah to the beginning of the Torah. When he published Chaim Tchila, he published it in a small size, and he says the reason he published it in a small size is because in the month of Tishrei, people are very busy. They don't have any time to learn. But they're always waiting online. They're in this store, they're in that store, so if he publishes a small sefer, so they have a minute here, a minute there, a minute there, they'll be able to take advantage of the moments of time. Rabbi Akiva valued every single moment. The Gemara says in Baba Kama that the coin of Avraham Avinu minted a coin. What was on the coin of Avraham Avinu? On the front was Bachur Ubesula, and on the back, Zakein Zakena. What's the meaning of this coin? It says, Otzi Pesach Frank, Avraham Avinu wanted to teach the world the value of time. Time in this world moves very quick. You think you're Bachur Ubesula, and just like that, Zakein Zakena. Life moves very, very quickly. That is the personification of the great Tana Rabbi Akiva. What could a person do in 1 moment, 1 second? Sefer HaChinuch writes that there's 6 mitzvahs tamidiyos, 6 constant mitzvahs. That every moment you think about one of these things, you get schar, ein kates, ve'ein shiur. What are the 6 mitzvahs tamidiyos? Sheyesh Elokah, that there's a God. She'ein zulaso, there's no other God. Liyachado, there's one God. Le'ahava also, to love HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Rav Miller would say, once a day, you should say, I love you, Hashem. So he would say, and if you're embarrassed to say that, you go into a telephone booth and you make a long-distance phone call. So I say that's why God made cell phones. What are cell phones for? Right? They disturb every waking moment of life. The purpose of the cell phone is the Yetzer Hara is saying, Yesh la'abed olamo b'sha achad. Every free moment you have. Why should I think about Hashem? Why should I get Olam Haba? Let me check if I have a WhatsApp. Let me check if I have a message. Let me check if I have a notification. That's the battle of life. Ibud Zman or Yesh Kona Olama b'sha achad. The Pri Megadim writes, the remez to remember the Sheish Mitzvos Tamidios is Sheish Arei Miklat Tiena. There's 6 Arei Miklat. Says the Pri Megadim, why are the Sheish Mitzvos Tamidios Arei Miklat? Because this world is a very dangerous place. We're constantly bombarded by the Yetzer Hara. We're constantly bombarded that he wants to be Ma'abed Chayenu. But we have Sheish Mitzvos Tamidios. These are the Sheish Arei Miklat, with which Yesh Koneh Olamo B'Shah Achat. They asked the great Posek, the Shevet Halevi, the Shmuel Halevi Vosner, should people think about the Sheish Mitzvos Tamidios? He said, Chabibi, I tell you, from the moment God put Seichel in my brain, not a day of my life went by that I didn't think about Sheish Mitzvos Tamidios. L'chol hapachot meya pe'amim. The Rav Vosner said there's not a day of his life that went by that he didn't review the Sheish Mitzvos Tamidios at least 100 times. So we're celebrating the great gift of life. That's the greatest matana that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. 60 years. Soimech Hashem l'chol hanoiflim. But life is not just years. It's not months. It's not weeks. It's not days. It's every moment. It's Shah Achat, Shah Achat, Shah Achat. And each Shah Achat, Yesh Koneh Olamo B'Shah Achat. So we're Mavarich Rabbi Ezra, we're Mavarich his wife and his home mishpacha. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu be mashpia on you. Chayim aruchim, Chayim shel shalom, Chayim shel tova. And may all the friends and admirers and rabbanim and everyone who has come tonight, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu be mashpia aleinu. Chayim aruchim, long, happy, and healthy life. Lanu l'chol Yisrael. Amen. Okay.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.